welcome to Tiki Man and the Viking podcast. This is the second part of the episode that we talked to Wade Hate Hampton. Enjoy. I know what you mean about photography and all that, setting things up. I storm chase, so I have a very angry medium that I'm usually trying to capture. And there's been times I've had tripods knocked over.
Oh,
There's times
sure.
I had some idiot in a truck go by at a high rate of speed, and I know I got dust in all my lenses. And, you can't figure a storm to do what you want it to do. But I've gotten my
No.
good shots. But yeah, it's that perilous thing that we're trying to put it together, and there is so many variables to it.
I think the funny
Patience.
thing about that, because I'm 100% with you, is if somebody you were telling that to, they see the photos, because, everybody loves the outcome.
Hmm.
They go, oh my God, I'd like to storm chase and take photos. That sounds like the greatest thing. And then they get out there and they're like, fuck this.
Yep.
So yes, it's
I,
Well, I mean
I always tell people, I don't want to know your ideas. I want to see what
that I
you've
mean
actually
that's
done.
that's true of most creative endeavors. I mean, I recently ventured after years of just baking bread. I've recently ventured into sourdough. Now I could show you the first loaf that I made, but it took 17 days to create the starter and 2 days to bake the bread.
Right.
And people don't get it. It took you nearly 3 weeks to bake a loaf of bread. Nobody wants to know about the process.
But they like eating that goddamn bread. I'll
Oh,
tell you.
they like
Yeah.
sitting down and watching that film.
Yep.
They like
Yep.
reading that book, and
Yep.
that's where this world of creatives that we have ventured into, Brian and myself, in terms of talk with people. It's kind of like everybody that we talk to, we get it, they get it. It's like the process is important. You want to complete that film, but you're also talking about how you're going to make the process a little better for yourself so you can enjoy it. Because if
Yeah.
you don't
God
enjoy the
forbid. Right.
process, you're not going to enjoy the final outcome, right?
I have this speech I give Art Brute Film, my little art group, every time we shoot. I'll say, okay, let's try to enjoy this day because there's a chance we're the only people in Wichita making a film today. Just trying to say, it's fairly rare. Let's not poo-poo it and just be like, all right, let's get the fuck out of here. It's like, all right, there's going to be a day you'll look back and go, it's kind of cool. We were out there on
Yeah.
that road. We got a guy wrapped in plastic that was part of the film, and every time cars would come by, they'd slow down. I'd go, no, will you sit up so they don't think you're dead? Because we don't want the cops. We've had the cops called so many times. So it's like, anyway, but you look back on, it's an adventure.
I had
Oh,
a friend that did a horror film, Darkness, Leaf Yonker,
Right.
and he had a guy covered in blood, and they were washing him off at a car wash, and somebody drove by and reported it to the police and caused quite the
Oh,
stir.
sure. I mean, it's funny because I told them out there, I said, we
Yeah.
sit up because, first of all, God bless them. They should. I
Yes.
think someone's being buried in you would like to think they'd call somebody, but anyway, then he sits up and he has blood running down his face. He's waving at them and
yeah,
they just kind of move on. But we
Yeah.
had a camera. We've always joked you could get away with murder if you got a film crew. You
Hmm.
could do anything. Shooting a film, okay, you're fine, and you're just doing chaos.
yeah.
Snuff
I
film.
have I have a story about a plastic toy gun spray painted black that didn't
Of course.
that the cops didn't think was fake. But that's another story for another time. We'll talk
Yes.
about that offline.
Yes.
But yeah, I get you. I get you. Oh God, that was terrible. When did you start? When did you realize that creating things, making art, film, whatever? When did you realize that was the thing for you? That was you?
Well, I think most artists always say, since they were a kid. And yeah, it was always kind of my thing. And it's funny because I got a big wake up call, but growing up in Clearwater, I was the artist kid, you know. And except for there was a girl named, what was her last name? Patty. She could draw horses really well. And I get really jealous because she get a lot of attention for her horses. And I was like, I can draw that damn horse. Anyway, but I remember my dad worked at the Wichita Eagle forever, and he had had this horrible accident in my junior high, so he was forced to retire, but he was kind of delusional in the sense that he kept saying, "Oh, go talk to the Eagle; they'll hire you. You can do it." I went in there, and I won't say that guy's name because he just took me out at the knees, but he like looked at my terrible portfolio and said, "Let me guess, you were the artist kid growing up that everybody thought was so good."
Ouch.
And I
Oh,
said, yeah. And he goes, well, you need to go to college. I was the same way and learn this and learn that and learn this. And he was right. I mean, he could have gave me a job in mentored me. I had enough stuff, but he pretty much was like, yeah, yeah, you think you're great, you're not. I mean, I was not cocky to the guy at all. But the funny thing is, he had illustrations all over his wall and they were burned into my psyche. And I remember at one point this has nothing to do with the story, but I remember at one point doing art and doing some illustration and thinking to myself, I'm better than that guy. Just like I'd gotten there. And I don't think I was, but I had realized he was right. I needed to go learn the skills, but it was always there. But it was good for me to probably have somebody like him to come in and give me a wake up call like, you're not a genius. Everything that you do is not fantastic. And boy, it's been a series of wake up calls that, I tell people all the time online, I'm average at best, but I've learned to accept that and find that I enjoy what I make, and that's what's
Right,
important.
right.
So
I,
I'm never going to hit a level of the greats of things I was always fascinated with, and I'm comfortable with that fact now because I
it
like what I make.
it takes me back to Mel Brooks' History of the World Part Two, or History of the World Part One, to
Hmm.
where he talks about the birth of the artist and the guy showing his cave art, and then they go, and then there's the critic, and it's the
Oh
guy
yeah,
that just
yeah. He
pees all
pisses
over
on
it.
it.
Yeah,
Yep,
and
Yeah.
it's like,
yep.
unfortunately, we do have to deal with jerks like that at
I
times.
posted a film once on a Facebook group. It was a big Facebook group. I can't remember what it was called. And I thought, oh, I'm curious. People always tons of reviews, put it on there. I knew it was weird. I had one guy tell me it was the worst film he had ever seen, and I should never make another film. And this took like 3 hours to get that comment. And I said, thank you for watching, because I always feel that way. Another guy jumped on and said, well, that's a little crude. It's not a good film, but I see he has some talent. He should stick with it. I wonder, right. Well, I'm almost 60. I've been doing this and I said, well, I appreciate your encouragement. Thank you. The other guy came back 4 hours later, said, okay, I only watched the first 2 minutes. I came back to finish it. Yeah, I was right the first time. This is the worst film
Wow.
I've ever seen, and you should never make another film. And someone goes, did that bother you? And I said, not in the least bit. That's their opinion. I love the film. I'm happy with the film. And that's what I mean. If I'm happy with it and it's done what I want to do as an artist, I'm good. But I'm lucky. I have a day job. I don't have to make money off of it. If I had to make money off of it, it'd probably be a whole nother beast. But
Right, right, right.
And there's a
Look,
bridge that somewhere is missing their troll.
exactly. Exactly.
in terms of your art, this is weird. I mean, for me as a writer of historical crime fiction, I can quote Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Hard Boiled School. Was there a school? Was there an artist when you were young? When you were that art kid in Clearwater, that set you on the path?
It's funny because there wasn't really fine artist. I was more obsessed with like Ray Harryhausen,
Oh,
stop motion
Oh
animation,
yeah,
Jim
Sinbad
Henson.
and Clash
Yes,
of the Titans, and
right. And
yeah.
I didn't get to see a lot. I don't mean to sound all wow, 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 but it was true. I mean, I grew up in this little farm outside of Clonmel, and like everybody else, we had three channels on a rickety old antenna. So the little we got to watch was whatever Dad let us watch because Dad
Mhm.
controlled the TV. So on occasion, you might see an old Godzilla film or something that was exciting. And I saw more film snippets from at the movies on PBS, Siskel and Ebert's old show.
right.
I was just like, wow, I was so excited to see even 2 seconds of a movie. So I didn't actually see really movies till I was probably old enough to really drive and go myself. So, but as far as fine artists, it's funny because I had no obviously, like you guys, it's pre-internet. So, I mean, I didn't have anything till I had gone to college. I didn't even know what commercial art was. I mean, I was a graphic design major because my orientation, whatever the heck you call them, was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know, design posters, I guess. She goes, oh, you want to be a graphic designer? I was like, what's that? I never heard of a graphic designer. So it wasn't until I got to college and met a few people, I started to go to the library and learning about Robert Longos and the Basquiat's and James Rosenquist and all these guys that I was like, I didn't know you could do that as an artist. I mean, I'd been maybe to Wham, Witch Art Museum maybe once. Had seen stuff that wasn't traditional, but I just didn't really know you could do art that wasn't traditional. So we started an
That's
art
good.
group when I was 25 called the Famous Dead Artists. And I think honestly, being in that art group with some of these artists that were doing pretty bizarre stuff made me go very quickly from more of a photorealistic way to wanting to break the rules. And so to answer your question, it was probably more television and film. Like I liked Rankin and Bass, and I remember the original Hobbit. I thought was the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Hmm.
And
Oh
they showed
wow.
that on television like at 77. And I was obsessed with drawing Bilbo Baggins over and over again. And I'd only seen the show once. There was no way to look him up. So I didn't really have an artist other than puppeteers and stuff like that that I knew who they were and were drawn to. And I liked Devo and like Judas Priest and Motley Crue. So
Okay,
I
right,
kind of
right.
liked the fantasy world of musicians, and I really thought what Devo was doing even then was so uniquely cool, and it was okay to be a nerd, which I was. So I was probably looking up to more everybody but, you know, traditional painters and artists and illustrators because I just had no access to them.
And I'm very curious about that time because I mean, my growing up, it was Clash of the Titans. You're
Yeah.
right, the Hobbit cartoons that I'd watch almost every Thanksgiving, they'd show them on TV. We'd go to Melvern Lake, and they always had the Sinbad stories on the weekends.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Oh man.
Flash Gordon, Star Trek, all that stuff. It makes me wonder if that wasn't here, how much that would kind of change our generation.
Yeah, it's funny because, and obviously it's still happening as much as it ever was, but we grew up around the same time. I've had this real kind of fascination with looking back on the 70s. And it's funny because pop culture was really having a good time with weird fantasy,
Hmm.
Bigfoot on Saturday mornings running around fighting crime.
Yes.
And it was so, and I love it. So I'm not saying this as a bad thing, but it was, look back, it's so dumb, but it was so
Hmm.
magic. Couldn't like, oh my God, there's someone in a suit and there's a laser coming out of him. I was just fun. I mean, and when I saw Star Wars, my brother-in-law took me to see Star Wars. First of all, I was seeing a movie, which I never went to. And it was like God spoke to me when I saw Star Wars. I just thought, we literally had left Earth. And I was obsessed with it. And I didn't see it again until I was older because we didn't go. Everybody else said, I saw Star Wars 40 times. I was lucky I saw it once. But it's like I remembered every second of it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think when we grew up, there was this I don't know, something in the air about all things were possible art-wise. And I don't know.
And it was almost like a mythic storytelling.
Yeah. And for me, it was escapism because growing up on this farm in the middle of nowhere, there was none of that. So if I could see it on the television or something, it was like the portal to another land. And I
Well,
read a
that's
couple of comic books, but I never read books, just so you know.
Mhm.
So that was my escape.
it's just disappointing then. We talked earlier about all the technology and all the resources available, and it's how everything has become, even with all that, has become formulaic. I mean, they're just falling back on, sequel after sequel after
Right,
sequel,
right,
and I think when Star Wars came out, and I was 15 when Star Wars came out,
right.
and that was non-traditional storytelling. You're right, as Brian, you said, mythic storytelling, something that was a combination of a Western and an adventure and everything all put together, but classic archetypes that you hadn't seen in a while. And you're like, wow, refreshing. And let's try what's going to happen for the next 10 years. And then new cycles came in, but it seems like let's replicate something from a commercial standpoint as opposed to an artistic standpoint. And I think that's where things have slipped through our fingers.
Well, it's funny because I'm not gonna lie and say I'm not excited to see what they do with this movie they're finally doing of Masters of the Universe. But I remember thinking, God,
God.
everything's just rehashing everything that we grew up with. It's happening over and over. But I get it. There's a built-in fan base, nostalgia. I mean, like I said, I'd be lying if I didn't say, well, I hope they don't screw it up because I want to see how good this is. But when you see something that's truly, I mean, as best as it can be, unique and new, there's not a lot of people coming up with these IPs of something completely brand new. And to go off on this tangent, that's why you're going to see Stranger Things till the day you die, because Netflix is like, we own something nobody's done, even though it's this mashup of everything we grew up on.
Right.
And I'm feeling the same thing about the He-Man movie, and watching the previews I'm laughing because it seems like his abs are the most developed muscle on his body. And his abs have the power, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. But we'll see.
Yep.
I'm still a target audience for a lot.
And join us in a couple of weeks when we continue our episode of Wade Hate Hampton. Until then, read a book. Tiki Man and the Viking Podcast, brought to you by Rumination of Thunder Media. The following intro and outro music was used for this media project. The music Find Them by Alexander Nakrata. Free download from filmmusic.io. License Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International.